All right, we got the green light.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming tonight. I do appreciate it. I hope you learned something. I think you may, because we've got a great modeler to talk with us. Before I turn it over to him, I want you to know that we are getting an awful lot of people sending in the answer to the question of when your model is finished. I really do appreciate that. I hope if anybody is on here tonight or anybody that sees this, if you haven't sent me your idea of when you know that it's time to stop building that model and move on to another project, I sure would appreciate it. I'm getting an awful lot of good information, and I really do appreciate everybody that's responded. Jack, for your information, the article on tools, I have 85 people who responded to the post that I put on my Facebook page. And it's not over yet. They're still coming in. So that I'm amazed at.
Fantastic. That's great.
We've got a new part of the event tonight. Frank Duder is going to be running his club's model railroad. And this was Frank's idea to start this. And he's going to be the first guinea pig to do it and to see how this is received, and if everybody wants to do this again. If you do, then what I need is other people to come in and say they'd like to be on that part of it, not necessarily the featured modeler, but the person that runs their model railroad during that event. And if you'll just let me know that you're interested in doing that, then I'll schedule it. With that said, I'd like to turn this over to Phil Edholm. Phil has really been great for me. I've learned a lot just talking to him the few times that I have. He's a businessman that comes from a technology background. He's a consultant. He's a modeler. He's just an all-around great guy. So I think you're going to enjoy what he has to say and how he blends technology into model railroading in our future. So Phil, with that said, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Cool. Thanks much, Jim. My name is Phil Edholm. I actually live in the Bay Area in California. And so I am actually, I would say, a fairly short-term modeler. I did some modeling back in the say late 80s, early 90s. Had a house and then ended up in the late 90s, changing job, moved, tore the layout out, and basically stopped modeling for 15 years. And got back into modeling in about 2015. Ended up going to a show and saw modular ON30 and said, gee, this is great. You don't have to build that. Basically, the emotional experience of tearing a layout out caused me to believe that if you ever built anything, you were guaranteed to have to tear it out again. And living in a large house with children leaving basically led me to believe that was a probability. So modular seemed really good. So my modeling has been basically primarily modular. What I thought I'd do is I'm going to run through just a few pictures to show you what kind of that is to get context. And then I'm going to come back and spend a little bit of time, what I spend a little time on is how you can use PowerPoint, actually do some very interesting things in modeling. And what's interesting about PowerPoint is part of a suite that Microsoft sells called Office that about 300 million people have access to, 400 million people, just about everybody. Turns out it's a drawing package that masquerades as a slide package. And once you learn how to use it as a drawing package, it's kind of really interesting what you can do with it. So I'll show you what you can do with that and some ideas. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share my screen. And I'm gonna share the right screen. And I am going to not do that. That's the presentation I want to show. I'll go ahead and throw this into slideshow mode. So I'm just going to do a real quick kind of view of some of the things that, let me close that, that I'm doing. So this is the first module I built. I started with an ON30 group, started running a few trains, bought a few engines. You see I did a few cars. I created some lettering and weathered some cars, but very basic. But I decided to have no module. This is a 2x6 foot module. The buildings are actually all built from kits, and of course I'm gonna pull a blank on the name now, Bandit kits, and really with not a lot of huge modifications, because I was really just literally trying to have a module I could take to a show. So a few pictures of that Oh, by the way, just on the upper right, that was the design of the module, again, done in PowerPoint. So these are just some kind of pictures of of what that was. The buildings have interiors, fairly simplistic, kind of as an initial first effort of doing some modeling. At the same time, we have a local club that's on a fairgrounds. I think it's probably the third or fourth, maybe fifth most visited layout in the United States. We actually have between 60 and 70,000 visitors a year. It's here in Pleasanton in California. So one of the things I've been doing there is rebuilding on the O side the layout. And this was an area where this was an access point where there was a crawl under, a duct crawl through a bridge. And it literally for 15 years was torn out and there was no bridge there, just the spline roadbed hanging out. So I actually have rebuilt that into a bridge. This was a construction shot. I actually don't have a good shot and can't get in right now to make a shot, but of cutting the spline roadbed and putting in essentially a bridge that would replace it. And also rebuilt a lot of the layout there. We're starting at one end and rebuilding. So if you look kind of in the back, you can see there was a station that was there. It used to be where this hill is, and that hill, in fact, if you look at the retaining wall, the hill on top of the retaining wall is actually all foam and can be lifted out. So you can get in and do maintenance in the area there in front of that. So kind of rebuilding things there, kind of making things look nicer. And if you look in the back, you'll see that that was literally the way the city had been for the past 20 years or 30 years. I don't think it had ever really been a city. Notice that in a moment we go forward. If you look on the left, that's actually a city that we built back there. That's actually done with prints from Costco that are 20 by 60-inch prints. You can get those for $19.95. Those are all buildings that come off the internet. Literally, that whole city was built for $200 in about 4 days. And then we've kind of been rebuilding the facility to try to make it much more attractive and build our relationship with the fairgrounds. So one of the challenges I've had over the past 3 years in model railroading is a significant percentage has been doing things like, if you look on the right, that structure that we built there, that's actually built. It's actually completely designed so it can be taken down, taken apart, and we store it inside the building. But we put it up for the fair. We have 4 weeks where we're open, where folks come in. So I go back to the modular, which is really what from a modeling perspective, my primary focus personally. This is a typical layout. It's a group called California Central Coast, and really has had a tradition of being some pretty brilliant modelers. Going back to a group that did the Yosemite Short Line back in the narrow gauge, at one of the narrow gauge conventions in the early aughts. A group that's kind of developed out of that. And actually one of the members on the bottom, this was a sawmill that at the Portland National NMRA convention came in second by 1 point to essentially the same kit. What happened was this group, we had 2 modelers. The gentleman who had the sawmill, Joe, he had about 7 modules, and we had another couple that actually had about 7 modules, and both of them came to a place where from a health perspective, they were no longer able to participate. So what we decided was we needed to build some modules. So I decided to build 3 4-foot modules. So this was actually the first module, and you can see that this was done quickly because the buildings are in fact Woodland Scenics pre-built. So this was kind of a thought process. You got to build a module fast. You don't want it to look junky. You want it to make it look nice. How do you do that? This was actually a construction picture. Unfortunately, this is sitting in a rack of modules right now, and I really can't get it out to take good pictures. So, but it turned out to be good. But I was kind of a little disappointed that while I saved time by not building the buildings, in the end, it's something that's really good to take to the public, but I was less happy about it as a modeler. So I began to look at doing the next building, the next module. And these 2 modules, you'll notice, are both kind of crossover modules. So together they do a link through from one side to the other. And I wanted to do a tunnel, so I started looking around. And the focus of the California Central Coast is the California Central Coast, which is actually a very interesting set of railroads, because the South Pacific Coast ran essentially from across from San Francisco all the way down the coast through the hills to Santa Cruz. And in Santa Cruz, they actually had this situation where it ran on the main street of town. The town, as it grew, complained, and they moved the railroad track back into the hill that was next to the downtown. And they couldn't cut the hill; they had to put a tunnel in, because on top of the hill is the Mission San Jose. It was actually the Jesuit, the original Spanish mission that was built there. So it actually turns out that that hill, I thought, was a great thing to model. So this was the second module. Again, these are not really completed pictures. If you look at the picture up in the upper right, you'll actually see that the church isn't there. Those are actually foundation blocks. But just to give you kind of an idea, this was really my first attempt at beginning to really try to take prototypical scenes into a model and into a module and how it looks. So if you look on the right, the upper picture is actually a picture that was taken when the station for Santa Cruz was actually there at this location. This is the south end of the actual tunnel portal. The lower picture is actually a picture I took a couple of years ago. And on the left, you see the tunnel portal. This was actually before ballast and some final details, but it was the best picture I had that kind of lets you see what I was trying to create, of beginning to really recreate the scene itself. That led me then to, and by the way, you asked when is a model done? Those are not done. I've just gotten to the point where I feel comfortable that they're done enough that I can leave them alone and go to the next one. Once I get end of these done, I'm going to go back and do a lot more detail work. This is actually a module that represents the Wilder Ranch, which is another scene. So after doing the tunnel, I said, well, I do a next scene, look for something that wanted to have I'm kind of enamored with the Bantha stockyards, wanted to have a stockyard scene, found there's a Wilder Ranch, which is now actually a state park just north of Santa Cruz. There was actually the narrow gauge ran through there, and Wilder had negotiated with both of the narrow gauge railroads that ran through to have a siding put in for him to actually have access to. Excuse me, not narrow gauge. By the time that's happened, they were converting to standard gauge. So this module was an attempt to basically recreate that. And if you actually go there, you can actually see the tracks. You can walk out to where the tracks are, see where the sidings were, and kind of recreate that a little bit. Very much Imagineered beyond that. The building in the front is a kit with quite a bit of modification to it. And this actually began something that started with the on the hill module. If you notice, there were, if I go back here, I'm going to go back one slide. So yeah, if you notice on the right there, those are actually an interpretation of a eucalyptus tree, and they don't, it's really not easy to see it there, but if you look on the left versus the church, that's an O-scale church that's about a foot tall. So those trees are 14 to 15 inches tall. And we're trying to recreate that look that you get with a eucalyptus. That was my first real attempt at trying to make trees real models. The tree actually on this module is actually created with wire, caulk, sawdust and glue on the outside of that, and then paint, and then actually using static grass, and then covered with leaves to try to get a real kind of more transparent or kind of structured appearance to the tree. And that's actually kind of the way the tree looks. I'm kind of proud of that, of making it into a real foreground model. These were actually some pictures I took. One of the things I really like about modules, you can take them outside. I live in an area where I actually have the capability of taking some pictures. What you're seeing here is actually the hill line that you see kind of going up to the right. And I think one of the trees you kind of see there are actually real trees. This is actually sitting in my driveway. I was particularly happy with the left shot, the one that's large. This is a truck that I picked up, a $5 truck that I threw on this. I put it out, one of my friends was over, we set this up out in the driveway. It was 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Took a picture of, set it up, put the truck on, took a picture. And when I looked at the picture, I realized that through total serendipity, it achieved something that is absolutely brilliant, which is getting the reflection of the sky in the window of the truck really makes the picture look very realistic. And really brings you back to that kind of taking pictures of what you model and trying to use that to feed back. What I'm working on now, and very much my focus, is a module called Moss Landing. I actually have a clinic on how I got this developed. If you look on the right, you actually see the modules. What this is kind of the story of is on the left is what it looked like in 1914. Actually, what had happened was the river diverted. This area got blocked off from the sea from 1906 to 1947. What I'm trying to do is a reimagination of the area that says it was opened up in 1910. A channel was opened up, and because of that, they actually put a set of piers and other things on the right side of what's now a real harbor. There's actually a real harbor in this area now that was created in 47. I'm just reimagining as having happened 100 years or 40 years earlier. What's interesting, if you look on the left, on the small diagram on the left, you can see down here, this is actually the local narrow gauge railroad that was built by Spreckles for actually for his sugar business of doing sugar beets. And there's actually a pier here that goes out into the ocean, and this is actually a Y. And I have pictures of all of this to actually model it. What I've done is taken that and taken this area right here, right where it's next to where it says dredged harbor, and laid this out to match what's on the module. So what you see is the tracks coming through. I have basically a warehouse here, a storage, shipping and storage facility, a station, and then a cannery and a fuel dock. And if you look on the right, they basically reflect that. Part of this was to create a module that was supposed to be very scenic, could be scenically interesting, represent the California Central Coast, but also be good for operations. So this is actually what it looks like, not quite today. It's actually almost all the dirt's done now on it. But this is basically 2 inches of foam, sculpt to mold on top of the framework structure. And this is a little bit about what the rest of it looked like. This is my other major project I'm working, is putting together all the bents and all the nut bolt washing casters to essentially create the causeways. And right in the front here, what you see where the little fishing ship is, that's actually going to be a representation of the Standard Oil dock that was actually in Monterey Harbor. And then the area behind that's actually the fishing, that'll actually be the fishing cannery. All of the buildings are designed to be mounted on masonite that actually has blocks on the bottom for alignment that sit into frames. You can kind of see those here on the left. You can see one that's open, and on the right you can see them all put in place. So I'm going to build all the buildings, and they'll be very easy to just pick up off the modules and store separately when I do transport, so they don't have to be in the trailer. One of the biggest problems with putting these things in trailers, they get bounced around so much that if you try to do detail or anything significant on a building, it's a problem. So these are kind of some pictures. Actually using a lot of the technique of using alcohol and then using chalk on the alcohol and kind of rubbing it in to get that real model look on wood like you'd see in a harbor area. That's kind of the last shot. This is the point I'm at now. This is a combination of caulk and real dirt. And I'm trying to use multiple colors of caulk to kind of begin to show the difference of the wet dirt, because there's a real pronounced line of wet dirt versus the drier dirt as you get up higher. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit about modeling. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, I'm really curious how you got that look on those piers. You said you used alcohol and rubbed.
So it's actually a technique that comes, I think, from Wild West models. I want to say, but basically what you do is you take the parts and you dip them in alcohol, but the alcohol wash is not as dark as you want the part to be. And then what I do is if you go to the dollar store, they sell a grater. It's a flat grater that's got a fairly fine screen on it. Or if you want, you get a micro grater, something like that. And if you just take chalks, and I buy the ones that you get at Hobby Lobby, and you take a black and a brown, and you kind of shave it onto it, it drops onto it, and then you kind of just roll them around. I just put them on a newspaper, roll them around. I get those plastic gloves. And what happens is the chalk doesn't get uniform on it. It gets very splotchy, so you get a lot of splotchiness on the wood. I don't know if you can see. Let me see. I don't know if I have a really good picture of that here.
Well, what you were showing looks really incredible there.
Yeah, so you can kind of see it right here. Here, hang on, let me get it. I'm getting a lot closer here if I do it this way, because now we're looking at the slide as a slide. But yeah, I was so impressed. So I'm part of the modular group. I'm part of one of the guys. Oh, I jumped all over the place there. One of the guys that were there told me about this, and I looked at what he'd done, and yeah. So that's basically. And then what I'm doing is I'm putting the nut bolt washing casters on them as well.
That's very nice looking.
Cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you for sharing.
So
this is actually what we thought.
Phil, before you do that, can you go back and talk about the trees again? You talk about making realistic trees and making it 14 inches high.
Well, yeah. So the thing about this area in Santa Cruz. So eucalyptus is actually a tree that is indigenous to Australia. So apparently at some point in the 1800s, a bunch of Australians came over and eucalyptus grow very fast and they're great shade trees. So they brought a lot of these these over to California. So they're all over in California. Never seen a eucalyptus. They're a very unique tree. If you remember that Oakland Hills fire, when they had that picture of the house, they had those trees that literally exploded next to the house. Those are eucalypts. They have an oil in them that's very oily and incredibly flammable, but they're really weird and high and tall. And the thing that these trees didn't capture, and you can kind of see this tree here, the thing they don't capture is they're not open enough, because I tried to use polyfiber. So like this little tree here, the little tree here is a polyfiber tree. It's a wire frame tree brought up and opened up, but then I covered it with polyfiber and then used those, Scenery Express has those micro leaves that you can buy. You buy a bag of them,
Yeah.
and you basically, you spray it. I'd spray it first with glue and then put those on. That works okay for a small tree like this. But when you get to a big tree like this, they look pretty cloud-like to me. I was not happy with them. So when I got to this model, what I realized was it was kind of this realization that trees on a module are different than trees on a layout. Trees on a layout are generally the next element above the backdrop painting. Right? So if you think about a layout in terms of the density to your eyes, you've got the backdrop painting and then most of the trees on the layout, and then you get into detail, and maybe there's some trees up here, but most of the trees are back in here. The difference with the module is that, if you look at this module, there's only 3 elements on the module. And I realized this when I looked at the drawing. It hit me, there were only 3 elements on the module. There was basically, the stock pins. There was this little storage, and by the way, I don't know if you noticed, one thing I am proud of on this, it's not obvious unless you zoom in on it. This was my, oh gosh, it's hard to control this when it's that zoomed in. But oh yeah, you can see it on the left. If you see on the side of it was the Wilder Ranch Creamery, because they made basically butter and cream, and so this is actually a decal weathered into the side of the building. But what I realized was you basically had these 3 elements. Now I realized, I looked at it, was that the tree almost had to be a scenic element. And so, if you look at the tree, you can actually, this is actually a pretty good view over here, is you can kind of see, it gets a fairly open appearance.
Now, how did you do that?
So what I did was I started with the 24, I think it's the 24 florist wire. It's the stuff you get in a spool. And I just cut off pieces that are, every piece has to be taller than you want the longest branch, plus about 3 inches. And then what you do is you basically take those, and I think I used 40 of them, 30, maybe 30. And you wrap them around. I put a a piece of 1/4-inch steel rod in my vise on my workbench in the garage, and I wrap them around that, and then just start twisting them. And then you go up, where this breaks right here, you just break them off, you start twisting them into two, and then you break and break, and just keep breaking it back until you get to the ends. And then what I did on this tree was on every end, I reflipped it back and turned every one of those into 3 separate branches.
Hmm.
And then you get that all laid out, and then you basically, go through covering it with caulk. Caulk first, because that gives the shape of the branches and covers everything. The beauty of caulk is you kind of put caulk on these things, kind of spread it on with a caulk knife, and then I've got a laundry room sink, and I just go in there and I get it running, and I get my fingers wet and just kind of take the tree, hang it upside down, because you got a loop to hold on to it now, because you got that loop that was around that you got that loop to hang on to, and you just use it to just spread that caulk down and smooth it out on all the branches to the end. And that makes you, and because it's caulk, it's all flexible. So now you can move into the positions you want it. Then you cover it with sawdust. That gives you the texture of the tree. Then you paint it. And then on the top, you do the static grass, and you used a couple of layers, and that's following what what's the Dutch guy who sells through Scenery Express,
Martin
Weinberg. Yeah, anyway, so his technique, he did a clinic at the Salt Lake NMRA convention on it. He talked about doing it for deciduous, but more talked about doing an evergreen with it. And so it's really doing that. And then the last thing is to use multiple colors of leaves.
Yeah, but how do you use the static grass? I've never heard of that before.
The static grass makes them little tiny branches. So you basically put, different, you just basically spray let me go to the next picture, because the next picture will be more obvious. So basically, these are the static grass pieces out on each end of the branches, and then the leaves stick on those.
How do you get the static branch on the wire?
You take static grass. So what you do is you spray, you take this armature after you got the armature done. You spray where you want the extra branches with the static grass. You spray that with glue. And then you take your static grass gun and you basically put the static grass on the armature. You clip one side onto the bottom of the armature, and then you use the static grass gun to stick it up so that those all stick out from the tree.
Ah, okay. Huh.
Yeah, I thought it was just a great technique. And so this was really me trying to take that technique and combine it with how I've done things in terms of generating, in terms of building the tree armatures and that. And then I really like those leaves, because you can buy 3 or 4 colors and you can kind of put them in different areas. So I try to put different colors on the sides of the trees, and darker on the top, and maybe then I turn them upside down and put some lighters underneath, try to give it some different colors so you get some texture to it.
Yep. And the caulk is just regular house caulk.
Just regular acrylic house caulk. In fact, it's the same house caulk I use to glue my track down to the Homa bed.
Got it.
I just buy
Okay.
a tube of acrylic caulk. Yep.
Okay.
So this was really what we talked about having a discussion about. It was really this concept of doing printed interior walls. This was set up as a Coast Division and MRA SED talk, trying to get people to do little talks on things. So this was actually the little house there. It's a DPM resin and Eleanor's house kit. What I realized after I started building this thing and I got the kit and I started looking at it was, the track level is 48 inches. This is about 12 inches above track level, which puts the foundation of the house at 50 inches, which means just about anybody who walks up is looking in the window. And, because of where this is located, on one side, it's about 8 inches from the side of the layout. And then the other side, it's about, 16, 14. So it really needed an interior. And, I looked at it and I said, but the problem with building a really nice house interior for this is, it's never can be looked at in real detail because you can't get any closer than that. And you're limited by the windows, etc. So this is what I ended up doing. I ended up printing the walls for the building. Unfortunately, I don't have a good picture of how this looks. But the thing that's so interesting about buildings is when you look at these little windows and looking across, when you look across the wall from the windows, because you have such a narrow field of view, you get no depth of field. So you can't see depth detail on the other side of the wall. So what I basically decided to do was to do the walls as printed walls. So if you look here in the middle, this wall here in the middle is a piece of a balsa wood. It was actually, the walls were glued on it before it was put into the building, but all the other walls were printed after the building was completely put together, painted externally, and then glued on the inside. And what you see at the right is the little diagram of it. And like I said, the thing that's really interesting here is the flat viewing angle. So one of the things on the walls, it's not going to be obvious here, but it'll be obvious when I show you the picture of the walls. I went in the kitchen, I used this blue and white wallpaper. When I was a kid, my parents are Danish. We always had those blue and white plates on the wall. So I went and I put blue and white plates on the wall. So when you look in the window, you'll actually see there are plates on the wall across that you can see. And like I said, the fact that there's no depth to them, you can't see because you're only looking at them straight on. So the way this works is actually really simple. You know, the first thing you do is you scan the model as a JPEG or a PNG. So if you look on the left, what you see is basically the walls of the house. What you see on the right is those three walls as they printed off the scanner bed. So you take the walls inside down, put them in your scanner bed, get them as square as you can, and just scan them. And so those are the three walls those three walls and where they went on the kit. Then what you do is you essentially turn that into a template. And so the way you do that is, you know, because they're a document now, they're, you know, a GIF or a PNG file, you can import a PNG file into PowerPoint. And by the way, you can do the same thing I'm doing here in any drawing application that you have. If you're somebody who uses a sophisticated drawing application, this will all work equally well in that. I used to use Canvas, but I didn't have a license for it anymore, and I didn't want to buy it, and I had PowerPoint, and it was free, so that's why I use it. Once you get those into PowerPoint, inside of PowerPoint, they're going to look like, essentially on a slide, like these kind of things. What you now can do is you can create a square that is actually the edge of the wall. And if you notice that square, it actually leaves a little bit of space at the bottom because I wanted to have a little bit of space to glue. But it basically represents the wall, and then I've represented the window. And essentially what that says is that's the limit of how big I want whatever my printed wall to be. Now, one thing you have to really remember when you do this is the walls all have an overlap where they glue. I forgot that the first time I did this, and I did it all really nicely, and the walls were all nicely done, and they're all, you know, basically, you know, 3/16 too wide or an 1/8 too wide. So when you do that, you want to subtract out the width of the walls and the depth of any floor that you put in. But now you have a template. And so the beauty of the template is that you now can use that to actually go fill it in. So you take off the wall thicknesses, and now you have the template. So these were essentially 3 rooms, 12 walls to build this thing out. And so if you look here, this is basically that living room. So these were the 3 walls from the living room, and then I created the 4th wall based on matching the wall that goes over here for the door. So those are the 4 rooms. This is the end wall, side wall over here with the door, side wall without a window, end wall going into the kitchen. And I started off, I was going to make them green, and I decided green, I just didn't like it. So this is essentially on the right what I created for that room. So essentially, these are the 4 walls that got printed and the floor that's in the room. So you can actually see this reasonably well there when you look down in here. You can see the walls. I did add curtains afterwards, some hanging kind of doily curtains, but you can see basically on the floor in the bottom, and that's actually what prints. So literally this can be printed on your computer after you've generated it. So the interesting thing here is that you can use Google to find things. So these are all of the slides that were in the deck, and I just went and found things. So this is kind of it's an interesting thought process. This is a search for Victorian wallpaper. And you kind of ignore the stuff at the top that's got prices. What I've done is I've clicked on images. So this is Google Images, and there are other image locations you can get stuff from. I found Google Images is really good for me, that what I can do is just look down through and say, oh, you know, that red style there, that looks really good. And so now I can just pick that up and I copy the image. And now that image, you know, I can bring it in. Right. So, you know, now that is something you can manipulate and you can put on the wall. Okay. And by the way, I'm going to open a different presentation saying, let me do that. I had something open and I closed it. And I want to go see if I can find it here again. Hang on. Oh, there it was. I actually had it there. It wasn't what I wanted to open. I opened the wrong thing. It's actually the top, actually this file right here. No, that's not it. That's actually, I'm sorry, I apologize for that. That wasn't what I wanted to open. I had a version of this open to show you how you manipulate the buildings, and then I closed everything because it was. Hang on. I know what the title is, so. I can't find it. Hang it. Now I'm gonna get mad at myself. Let me go back to the presentation and go through it, and then I'll come back to something else. I apologize for being. But anyway, if you look here on I did want to show you this. So these are some examples. So this was Victorian wallpaper. Let's say you're printing a wall and you want a door. If you're building and modeling 1900, you could put in 1900 interior doors. You could put in 1950 interior door. And you'll notice what you do in images is you get lots of images. But the beauty of this is you can pick these images up and bring anything that you get in there back into the application. So, you know, if you look here at these doors, I actually had one that was very interesting here on this one. This door right here. You know, again, you can pick that image up, copy the image, and you can now apologize for that. I've got too many things. I've got too many windows open here for other things. So now you've got the image in here in your location. So the cool thing about PowerPoint and these drawing programs is I can now manipulate this object. So if you've got a computer and you got this program, the thing to do is use the right mouse button. The left mouse button lets you move things around. The right mouse button, oh, hang on, I don't want to do that. That was a mistake. The right mouse button lets you bring up a set of tools. And the one tool that's really important is the crop tool. So if you've never done this, click on crop. And what it does is it makes a frame that you can grab onto. So I'm grabbing over here on the frame, and you notice I can bring it down here and bring it right over to there. I can bring this right over to here. And now I managed to make that door a little different size. There are some things about how this thing is aligning that are making the side on here make it kind of a little weird for me, but that's okay. I'm going to do it like that. Now, the other thing you can do is, again, if you right mouse click, you notice down here it says size and position. And so let me grab this, and I'm going to take this and go back on this slide right here. So if I wanted to put this on that door there, if I wanted to put this and make this the size of the door in this drawing, see, I can bring it over here and I can say, oh, well, doors in this model are about that tall, so I'm going to make that door about that tall. If you want to make it narrower because they were narrower, then you can make it narrower. So, you know, essentially what you've done is taken something from the web and put it inside into a building. And so if you look at this, this is basically, each one of these is an object that you brought in. It's like these pictures here. That's a picture that I found on the network, on the internet. And then I found a frame and I put the picture on top of the frame. Does any of this make sense to anybody, how this works?
Yeah, it does to me. I hate to say it.
So it's just literally everything is just a thing, and you grab it. And so then the other thing is, if you go get a texture, so let me show you some other texture places. So here's another one. Oh, this is actually another door. I found this door. This was a nice door, nice kind of 6-panel door. The other thing, if you want to do anything on your computer, if you've never been here, this is a place called textures.com. And they sell these texture prints, but you get them for free. Notice I have 15 free credits. So they have just incredible textures. So you look at this, you say, oh, that's not very interesting. When you click on metal, you can see metal, and they're going to bring up all sorts of metal for different things. And we're going to go down here and we're going to say, well, you know what? We really are interested in roofing. So let's bring up roofing. And we probably want to bring up metal roofing. And there are 73 photo sets here of metal roofing. And you can actually take these and just build them into, you can use these, so if you're building a model, you can actually use these for roofing if you want to, or for anything else you want. And there are full buildings in here. Like, one of the things I did is show you another picture here. Go back. I did actually have that one. Let me see here. Josie, I did want to show you this other one for how it works, but let me. This is this presentation I wanted. So this is actually a copy of how this really works. This will let me show you a lot more how it works. So this is the wall, like we said. This is an example of a picture. So if you look at this, this is one image. So if you wanted to find a picture frame, so just if you want to say modeling, pick a modeling era. You just go in and you say, I'm looking for wall pictures 1970. And then again, you go to images and you get all sorts of weird, of course, 70s may be a weird time for wall images, but it looks like these were really popular. So, grabbing something like this or a picture like this and saying, okay, I'm going to take that picture and reuse that. The Ford truck wall art that, I'm going to take that. Let's say I decide I really like that picture. Again, what you can do is copy the image. And I'm going to put that picture in this frame here and show you how you do this. So I bring it over here, and what I do is I copied it and I pasted it. So this is now an image, and this design idea is I just ignore it. Again, first thing you want to do is crop it, because I want to get rid of the couch, because the couch doesn't have any meaning in modeling. And so I just basically crop it down like this to where I want. And clicking outside, that's what's left. And then I can put it in here like this. And then if you decide if you want to scrunch it or if you want to take the frame and go like this. Now, if you do that with the frame, obviously that's making it look kind of funky, but that's kind of the concept is and then if you click both of these in the tool, you can always group them. So what you do with that is you had in this you had arrange and group, and they are now a group. So now you can move that. So now I can take that, for example, I've copied it. I hit Control C just then. I assume everybody knows Control C and Control V is how you copy and paste. And you just, once you learn it. So now if I go up to a wall, like this was the wall that I was going to print out, and I say, you know what, these are just too new for us. Let's put in that picture. We're going to scale it down and put it up there on the wall. And the beauty of this is when you print this out, it's an 8.5 by 11 sheet, right? So again, if you look at anything on this sheet, the sizes actually are real sizes. So again, if I click on this and I click on size and position, then you can get the size and position of everything. So I know that this piece of paper here is going to print out 2.1 inches wide, because that's the way it's going to print out, because this is an 8.5 by 11 sheet. By the way, for those of you that have never done this, when you first go into PowerPoint, if you're going to do any printing, click up here where it says Design, go on Slide Size, go to Custom Slide Size, and choose letter paper. And by doing that, you're actually making a slide that is letter paper sized. And so you get a 10.5 by 7.5 inch print area that'll print out in your printer. And again, from my perspective, like I said, for these kind of things, because you're doing them as in a building, I don't think you really have to worry very much about the UV issues, because they're inside a building that's closed and it's typically dark most of the time. So it's not like an open piece of paper. So this is the same process for the kitchen and bedroom. Scans on the left. In the middle, you've got the rooms laid out, and on the right, you've got the final prints, including the floor on the bottom, the floors that I added. And this is the same technique. This is actually how those buildings were created. So Costco has these 20 by 60 inch print. They're glossy. I did spray these with dull coat. I think I want to do it one more time, but basically what these were the prints cut out, mounted to masonite with sticks mounted to that with hot glue. And then those are all just screwed in against the wood. That's kind of the bench work. There's kind of a hole back there in that city. And then on the back, they're screwed up along the wall. But if you look like here at this bridge that goes across, there's a recessed theater back in there. And you can't really see it from here, but all the building names were changed to local city names, etc. So that's kind of the end of it. I will stop sharing. Was that too kind of detailed or hard? Do folks kind of understand that?
Yeah, I followed it fine.
Okay, cool. I mean, the beauty of this, guys, is so what I did was I painted, if you look at where the doors and windows are, I painted the inside of the casting. After I got it all done, I painted that to match what I was gluing. And then all you do is just take that sheet of paper, cut the wall out, cut the window out with an X-Acto knife, and basically glue it in.
Mm.
And they like I said, if you go, I'll put it back up one more time. Now that you know what the process, you can kind of see how it looks. So this will make you sick. But when you look in through the side windows, it's really amazing. And then what I did was I did put there are some other details in. There's just some doll furniture and stuff, and there's a woman here. But when you look through it, actually is very realistic. And when you look, the walls move and you see them. The other thing I didn't talk about, which I didn't do here, and I should have done. And so one of the things I always learn when I just go back and think about what I should have done. I'm gonna go down here and go to this. I want to find one print here, this one here. So if you notice, this is the one that's got these, it's got the plates on the wall. So again, this is the wall in the kitchen. So if you look through the window, if you stand on one side of the wall and look through the window, you actually see this on the wall. When I made this, it didn't hit me until I was talking to someone later. It turns out one of the things that this little program does is if I click on an object, I can go up here and I can look at the shape. So I can fill the shape. Since this is a picture, you wouldn't fill the shape. I can put an outline. See, I can put a red outline around it. But if it's, hang on, let me take that out of there. See if one of these is round. I think one of these was, I think one of these was round, and I was able to put a, you can put a shadow on it. So one of the things I'm interested in playing in is the idea of, can you put a shadow? So I think I can do one on here too. The shadow. And so, you know, you actually, and you can control the shadow. So I'm kind of thinking it may be very interesting to say, you know, do you actually put shadows on things? Because if you know kind of the way somebody's going to be looking, you can provide more dimensionality to it. So anyway, I think I think there's just amazing what we can do with this stuff in modeling for interiors. So I think that's it, Jim. I think I'm done. There's no, I'm.
Wait, I got a question for you. If you can do it on the inside, why can't you do it on the outside of the building?
There are a lot of folks that are doing it on the outside and doing printed models. We actually had on one of the sessions I was on a while back, somebody did a great job about that. You know, there are clever models, they make those, where it's basically you print it on cardstock. You don't just print it on regular paper, you print it on cardstock, but doing exactly the same thing. It really is, and you could layer it too if you wanted to. The thing that's so interesting about the interior walls is, for most of our models, if you look at them, you really can't see the whole interior. Our buildings are so small, you don't get this kind of, you know, if you think about it, when you walk past walk past something or look in through a window in a big building, as you move, you can see the interior of the building and the depth. The problem is our buildings are generally so small, you can't see that. Right? So you just kind of get, if you think about window through, you get kind of just one view through the window, so you don't have to have the three-dimensionality. But no, I think it's a pretty interesting thing. The only challenge I think potentially outside is, you know, it's going to be in an area where it's dark regularly. Because I'd worry about the UV long term.
Yeah.
You know,
what about businesses? The interior for businesses works the same way?
Absolutely the same way. And again, the cool thing is, if you think about it, go online and say, you know, if you're modeling, I mean, pick a business, right? So the beauty of the whole thing of using pictures and the internet is, now I'm going to be bad and share my screen again, is, you know, let's pick a business, because if we do this together, it's really interesting to see, you know, kind of how this works. Because, you know, if you pick a business, somebody pick a business that you'd have on a street side where you'd have a view into it.
About a diner.
A diner.
Hardware store.
Diner, and let's say 1950.
I need to turn this into a diner.
But you know, so you have to do some looking. But you know, there's a whole bunch of shots here of different diner interiors. You know, now the other thing you can do is you can take and you can make your own, right? Just like I did. So you go in here and look and say, okay, well, you know, a diner would have had red and white and that. I'm going to take some of that and build that. I'm going to go get some pictures of the backgrounds and do it off the backgrounds. Let's put diner interior, not interior. How about interior? But, you know, a picture like that could even be, you know, if you had a front window, that might be an interesting picture right there.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
and again, it's kind of, so I wasn't trying to do a picture that you put behind the glass. It was more the idea of kind of putting it on the walls inside. But I think it's just, there's so much stuff out there on the internet now that's easy to get. And it's kind of where you spend your time. Because again, where kind of my perspective is, You kind of spend your time getting through everything to a nice level, and then you kind of come back. And Jim, your question about when a model's done, I think as long as you have it in a place that you can see it, it's never done. It's only done when you put it away in a box that you know you'll never look at it again. Right? Because anytime my point is, anytime you look at it, you say, well, maybe I should do this. And it's not even an idea of more detail. It's just like, well, it'd be really cool if I did that. And that becomes something you start thinking about. And then all of a sudden, so it's only done if you can't see it. Anyway. Well, I appreciate you guys looking at that stuff, and I appreciate you seeing that. And if anybody has any questions on how to do that stuff, feel free to ping me. I'm easy to find, I think. So.
Yep, I want you to write that up about when a model's finished. Put it on an email to me.
Yeah, I will.
That's great. Anybody got any more questions for Phil?
No, thanks for doing that. That's some good stuff there. It's I think it'll be remarkably easy to do. So.
Yeah, it is.
Excellent clinic. Thank you.
That's the thing. It really isn't hard once you figure out that it's just a little drawing, and you got the. By the way, let me show you before I break this. Let me show you one more little tool, and this I'm just going to do this. Well, let me actually open something else here. So this is actually how I created the drawing for that. This is actually the drawing for the module.
I don't think you're sharing.
Oh, I'm not sharing. Let me share. Hang on. I'm sorry. I should have shared before I did that. Doesn't do any good if you don't see it. Throw this full screen. So this is actually the way I do create essentially my designs for things. What's cool about this is everything here is just a PowerPoint object. This boat is just an object. This building is just an object. The tracks are objects. So here's an interesting thing. This piece of track, actually, let me put it back where it was. This piece of track, if I go back again, I'm going to go right click on that track, and I'm going to hit size and position. I'm actually not on the track right now. There I am. So you'll notice that track, it gives me the size of it. But if I click over here on color, right? Paint can would be color. You'll notice I can look at the line. And what I've done is I've made this line a compound line. So a normal line would look like this. What I've done is I've made it in here. They have the idea of a compound line. So that's a compound line, which means it's two little lines with the air gap in between them, which happens to look a lot like track. And at this scale, which is 1 foot to the 1 inch, because again, remember I have size on everything, 1 inch is 1 foot. So what's cool about this program is if I go back to that line and I right click on it again, it opens up that tool. And in that tool, there's a little thing called edit points. And that actually lets me edit these as essentially a controllable thing. So if you notice this point here, I can click on that point, and I now have where that point's connected, I have where it's pointed to. And you notice I can move it around. And you happen to notice that there's a little red line there. There's a guideline on those turnouts. And that guideline is actually the center line. As long as you line this up and just move it to the right point, depending on how you do it, you get perfect transition curves. And by the way, again, you can go in much bigger on this. These are actually either scanned. Some of them are scanned, and some of them are actually from Fast Tracks templates. They're scaled. So, this is basically a switch. Anyway, so just how you can use this stuff to do really pretty amazing stuff pretty fast. And by the way, if anybody wants that kind of stuff, if you can't find me, Phil Edholm, I'm pretty easy to find on the internet. I put my email up. I can send you what I've done templates wise. You can have like the city stuff. I already provided some of that to someone. So.
And that was all on PowerPoint, Phil?
It's all, I've done it all in PowerPoint. Again, just because it turns out I'm a guy because I've been in the world of doing lots of presentations in business, I'm actually really good at it. But it turns out any drawing package work, it just turns out to be an easy drawing package.
And it's free.
And well, it turns out so many people now have Outlook either because they got it with their computer or they buy Office 365 to have it for business. It's just kind of everybody has it, but everybody looks at the thing that's interesting. Everybody looks at PowerPoint as the slide package. They don't realize it's really just, it really can be used as a drawing package. It turns out for O scale, it's brilliant because in O scale, you don't have to think about anything because a 1/4 inch is a foot. I don't have to think much. You know, if I want to do a 2x12, right? Or I want to put a 12 inch by 12 inch beam on. By the way, I've done bridge designs. I can show you printouts where I've done the same thing, printed out, use that as the template to build bridges. If you look at the, I don't have a good picture. I have a good picture. I can't show it, but on that first module I built, there are 2 scratch-built bridges. You know, one's a truss bridge and one's just kind of a pier bridge. And both of those were the truss bridge was completely designed in PowerPoint, because again, a 1/4 inch piece of wood is a 12 inch beam, so it's a really easy to put things together. You know, for example, the templates for all those piers, basically I designed them in PowerPoint, printed it out, glued that to a piece of wood, glued some pieces on to make the jig, and then made all of the piers. So it just becomes a really easy tool because it's just a simple drawing tool that's free and easy. And with that, I'll stop. I shouldn't sell it anymore.
Well, you've taught us a lot. I appreciate it so much, Phil. Thank you very much.
You're more than welcome. And by the way, I am gonna put together a clinic on the trees. I'm gonna do for the new modules. I'm gonna do a couple, and I'm actually gonna go through the whole process of doing how they do it, and probably do a write-up on it, because I think you can do some really pretty interesting trees that way.
Maybe you can come back and show us, because I'd like to see that.
Super.
Well, listen, now let's move to Frank Duder. And Frank is going to run the club's model railroad. And the club is interesting. It's got 7 people. It's called the Cordry. I think it's Cordry.
Cordry Company.
Company Crossing Model Railroad Club. It's got 7 members, 5 guys, 1 lady, and 1 6-year-old that knows more than most of us do, according to Frank. So he's probably right about that. So Frank, I'll turn it over to you now and look forward to seeing your model railroad.
All right, so I want to turn my screen on to the engine here. All right, so I mostly run MPH up here. I can't tell by the smoke engine there, smoke coming out. We got 4 main lines. You're hear me. We got 4 main lines. This is one of the big points here. If you can see it right there, we actually have a real water river. It's no water in it right now. It's just a little bit humid production rate. But it's really cool. So it comes down. It starts down here in this little pipe, and it drains all the way down to the other side of the river and goes in that basin. And then it's pumped up to the top of the mountain, and there's a mill up there. It comes down, the water comes back to the basin, and pumped down to the other side.
Frank?
Yes. Yes.
If I may suggest, move your camera much more slowly, because you move it so fast, everything's a blur.
Okay. All right, yeah. So, yeah, there's the river. It flows down this direction. It comes into the basin here. And then pumped out to that one mill up there, up to the top of the mountain, flows out to the mill, comes back to the basin, and pumped out to the other side again. You guys see that?
Yep.
I got to admit, using actual water is kind of unique. I haven't heard of that
Yeah.
one before.
Why do you use actual water?
Make it more realistic, and it's kind of cool.
We lost you.
Yeah, I think he just totally cut out.
That's what you get for using real water.
Yes.
I got to admit, though, it is a unique idea. It is a unique.
I think he's trying to get back in, Dylan.
Yeah, that's just it. I'm not seeing I'm not seeing his video feed anywhere. I'm just not seeing his video feed. I don't know what happened.
Traditionally, real water doesn't work real well because it's tends to
Yeah, we're back.
get moldy and things like that. Oh, we're back.
Yeah, we're back. I'm heading back upstairs, guys. Let's go on. All right. So right there, you have our passenger yard. It's more of a scene of Baltimore area. You feel the ship there, paint on the wall. Comes down, has a station there, Tropicana train. And there's a Menards Pepsi building.
Damn, he's cut out again. Why?
I think we lost. There he is.
He's flickering in and out. I'm wondering if he just doesn't have signal upstairs.
It might be.
Oh.
Oh, we see the train moving. Oh, we did.
Okay, we did see it for a while.
Impressive layout.
If you can see.
Yeah, Frank, can you hear us at all?
I got a question. Is that the same? Is that sort of the same thing that has happened when my phone was acting up when it was overheating?
It could be. It could be any number of things that's causing an issue with the video. It could be any number of issues. Could be bandwidth. Could be signal. It could be the phone overheating too. Who knows?
It's always the Chinese. We don't have enough levity in our lives, guys.
Anybody that's ever had their layout open, tell me if this has not happened to you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, as soon as somebody's watching, everything goes wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey guys, is that better?
You're back.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. The Wi-Fi dropped. But yeah, there it is. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
All right. So that building there is a model of the building we're actually in now. It's kind of cool. I want to put some candlelight LEDs in there sometime soon. So we had the flashers engaged when the sun goes across here. The M1B coming down right now here.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't, I've lost it.
Yeah. The video keeps cutting out.
All right.
Hold on. Let me see if I can.
It's actually weird. It's kind of been okay for me.
Let me
I'm
see if
seeing
let me
it.
see if spotlighting it will fix it.
I spotlight it because the problem is if you don't spotlight it, it jumps all the time.
All right.
So you have to do it. So for you, if you don't know what you're saying, is if you're in the view, go click on the video you want to see, and you'll see a thing that says spotlight video or pin video. I think it's called pin video.
I've had it pinned and I've been able to see him, but I can't hear him if he's talking.
No, his audio has gone pretty bad.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
All right, yeah. So this is a model of Paul Jones Lumberyard. It's right in our town here. Steve Brown, one of the members, built this thing. Kind of cool. And we have a little button here for kids to hit. It's a little lightning strike.
Oh,
Actually, kind of clever.
Yeah, it is.
There's a lot of clever little things that these guys have tried. That you guys have put in here. This.
Yeah. We have multiple buttons all the way around. And we have one of MCH shell stations there. We have a homemade model of a John Deere stand. Right there. Quite a few custom buildings.
I think it's positional. I think as he moves farther to one side of the building, he moves farther away from the router and it drops out.
Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fact that he recovered the first time by going back downstairs, I think it's a distance issue.
Yeah.
You know, I will give him credit. At least is this the first time doing it? But you know what? Credit for what we've saw so far.
Cool.
It's a few little interesting ideas. Like, I get you can't beat the look of real water, but this is the first place I've seen it actually implemented.
Yeah, but the idea of having a hot tub in your train room.
yeah.
There's an interesting concept there. I have to think a bit more about.
You know, that might be something if you could figure out how to make the bay on a module self-contained. If you could figure out how to seal the two halves of it so it doesn't leak. I mean, the problem is you'd have to do it on one module in order to pull that off. But
yeah, but don't your wooden structures start warping?
Yeah. So
you'd probably have to seal them.
Keeps getting hot and it's cutting in. I was thinking about that. You guys hear me now?
Yes.
All right.
Frank, maybe you ought to try to stay. Why don't you just stay where you are and maybe just try to talk us through your model railroad, because it seems like if you go too far from where you are, we'll lose you again.
Okay, so I'm gonna stay right here where I'm at. So we have a freight yard here. If you look in the background there, we have a display of a local farm right down the road. We also have a little coal mine in the corner. We have the roundhouse is back over there. There's quite a few touch buttons, like a police car down there. It lights up, we hit the button. There you go. And the far end, I don't want to lose signal again, but the far end, we actually have a highway that moves.
You mean you can run the cars on the highway move?
It moves real slow over there.
How do you do that?
So it's a bicycle train chain.
Under the
It's hooked up to a bicycle chain and it runs. I'm trying to creep my way over there.
You use magnets on the cars?
No.
Hook 'em right-
It's on a
hook the cars
bicycle
right to a
chain,
chain.
and we have little clips on it. And it's hooked up right to the cars.
I see.
Yeah, there's like a little pulley system.
So, and your chain is on top, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, it's right in that groove, but
Yeah, so
that's
it's
kind
a,
of clever.
I'll show you there. There it
I've
is.
never,
Little pin.
Frank, I've never seen anything like that done like that before. I'm really interested in it because I'd like to see how it's possible to move cars and things like farm tractors in a field and that kind of thing. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So, someone makes a chain on edge kit for HO that uses magnets. So you put it underneath. That Luke Towan, the Australian guy, actually had a module he built doing that. But this is, I mean, what's really interesting about this is if it's in the background, like where you have it, you can't really see it, right? So in other words, you're seeing vehicles moving around, but you don't see the chain on edge because it's lower than the road, and you kind of don't see it through there. It's kind of interesting that you don't really have to hide it if you put it towards the background like you did. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that the problem with the magnets is that I understand it, you can't run a lot of cars like he's running here on that system.
You can't run anything larger than the little HO stuff, lightweight HO stuff. Exactly.
And so, when you start talking about S&O scale and the larger scales, and there is one company that's trying to experiment with it right now and come out with something different. But I haven't seen something like this. This is much more robust than anything that I've heard about or seen to be able to do this. And Phil, I agree with you. As long as you're doing it in the background, all you're seeing is the cars moving or tractors moving in the field or whatever. I mean, you have no idea how they're doing it.
Yep.
Especially if it's something in the background like that where you're not standing right over it to see the chain.
Absolutely.
And what's to say you can't put little covers over the exposed portion of the chain? Just so that way when somebody is looking at it real quick, they don't know, you might notice a piece of the road moving, but that's different. There's a lot of little creative little ideas these guys have put into this.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff I haven't seen done before either.
How did you hook the cars to the bicycle chain, Frank?
So there's a little screw and nut right there. I'm trying to zoom in on it. Let me stop it real quick. I'll show you. All right. So, you guys see the car?
Yeah.
All right. There it is, a little nut and screw. It's right into the bolt.
So you replace one of the link pins. You replace one of the link pins with a nut and bolt. Yeah.
Yep.
Basically gives it a dowel for a car to hook onto.
Yeah, the car just sits on top of it.
That's it. And then
what did you make the track out of that the chain rides in as it rides across the layout?
It's some 2x4s, and it says a slip in the center.
So it's just sliding in wood.
Yeah.
Okay,
so
cool.
Nothing even all that fancy.
No, and we got 2 whip pulleys on the ends, and then we have a motor hooked up underneath there.
So you just have a hand crank under. You just have a hand crank underneath, and have one of the kids crank it when you want to run it.
And we have a piece of hosing, water hose that hooks up the motor to the pulley, so it spins it around.
Great.
So it's a motor on pulley.
Basically, yeah.
That is different.
That's pretty creative, I think. I like that a lot. That would work on a lot of layouts.
Yeah.
Well, then the question just becomes, how do now it's not a question of can you do it? It's been done. Now it's just a question of implementing it yourself.
Yeah. Can you build it is the only question.
For somebody who's never done something like this before, it would probably take some doing to go through and figure out how to do it.
Well, Frank can be the mentor.
But somebody's, like I said, it's already been done.
Frank's done it.
So if it's been done by one group, somebody else can replicate that.
Yeah.
And that's impressive.
Frank, you got an article there if you want to write it.
Well, in my spare time, maybe.
That's great.
That's different. That is very different.
Frank, talk to us about the water again.
Okay, let me walk over there real slow. So that's real water out there. As we're right on the riverside here. And we are right on the Pocomoke River and on Chesapeake Bay watershed. You'll see the drawbridge out there. So we have a water machine underneath this big mountain here. And the water is pumped up first up to that little house there. And there's a little stream that cuts down and goes into the mill area. And it goes into this big basin. And then it's pumped down again and goes all the way to the other side of the building. And it's pumped down the river and it falls back into the basin and the recycle goes back over.
Lord have mercy on my soul.
So basically that bridge area acts as just the reservoir for the water.
It is. And then in the bridge area, we have a train wreck there.
Where are you located?
Snow Hill, Maryland.
Oh, Snow Hill. Oh my gosh, I'll be down there in like 2 weeks.
So just out of curiosity, how do you treat the water?
Well, we only run water in here for Christmas time and usually maybe 3 weeks max.
Oh, it's a
And
bathtub.
all we do is just refresh the water.
Right. Okay. So you put the water in, run it for a while, and then take it out. So it's not there sitting. I was just wondering about how it would be sitting.
Yeah. I
Okay,
mean,
cool.
sometimes we even put a little baby goldfish in there for the kids.
I'll be darned.
How much electronics do you have near that water?
Actually, we don't have many electronics. It's mostly just a little bits here and there.
So how did you seal the scenery where the water is? Because that's always been my problem, is that the water wets the scenery.
So right here in the cameras, we got fiberglass and epoxy, and we have pieces of wood on the sides, and it's treated in fiberglass.
Well, it is in a boat. You guys do have boats downstairs. I saw that. So it's not like you don't have access to fiberglass.
Yep, we are Pocomoke River Canoe Company. We do canoe kayak rentals, repair, and that type of thing. So we have access to that.
Okay. So basically you built that to tolerate water well.
Yeah.
Cool.
The opposite of a boat.
That's impressive, though. That is very impressive. I mean, if you tried to put that on someone's layout, like an actual water feature, that's, don't get me wrong, it's going to come with its own set of challenges to maintain it. But like I said, this is the only one I've ever seen. I had the idea, and I mentioned it to someone years ago, and I was called an idiot for it. Well, obviously it's doable.
I've heard of somebody doing it before. I want to say John Allen experimented with it, but I don't think he had any luck with it.
Maybe it comes down to the materials. If these guys are using like fiberglass, like what you would patch a boat with, maybe that's what you need to use, because it's already going to repel water.
Yeah.
And then build your scenery on top of it and seal it accordingly.
Can you imagine putting guppies in that thing?
Kind of depends on the scale.
I'd tell you, that would be something to see, though.
Attach little HO scale fins on their back.
Yeah.
Sharks.
With appropriate music. Dun, 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 dun.
Hold on. You could probably do the music without putting the fins on the fish. Let's be honest.
Can you imagine the fishermen on the shore, though? That's what I was thinking. I mean, my God.
Oh God, you could eat. the fish would go bad before you can finish eating it. But that is something else.
Very nice.
And like there's some definitely creative ideas in here. I like it. I really do.
Frank, are you still here? Have we lost him, Gillen?
No,
I'm right here. Let's walk away for a second.
Oh, okay.
No, the video is good because there's a flashing red light up there in the ceiling.
I think that's
Yeah.
from one of the buildings down there, or the.
Yeah,
I think it's an
that's the Pepsi
ambulance.
building. The Pepsi building has a red strobe light on top.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
I have fish in my rivers.
You do?
Absolutely.
Do you have little fishermen that catch them?
Yes.
Okay. I got to see that to believe it.
What I use casting resin for my rivers and waterfalls.
Ah,
And what I did was I took some sort of light pink orange plasticine, and I took a real small piece and I would just roll it in my fingers to about the right size, and then pinch the tail and give it a twist, and you can make quite a lot of them fairly quickly. And then I would put them on the bottom of the river before I would pour the casting.
right.
And there's schools of them all along the river. And I've got a couple of fishermen with a fly rod out hooked on down into the middle of them.
I bet that's a beautiful scene.
I have to see if I can find a shot here for you.
So guys, that big coal train just went by has 38 cars on it.
What do you use for control of your trains?
We have 4 Z4000s right now, and we have a TIU currently in the shop.
Okay. How many trains do you run, Frank, at one time?
We have 4 main ones, so we can run 4 main engines. The most I've ever had is four engines on one track. So that's when we have quite a few people running around with phones up here too, running them.
Yeah.
So we can have. I think the max we ever had one time was like 11 for one time.
Jeez.
Not really hungry. I don't know what to do.
Oh,
This is your 38 cars?
Yep, 38. 38 plus engine and caboose.
Yeah.
Has a Pennsylvania E8 on the front, ABA unit, and we have a Norfolk Southern caboose on it.
add a small fan on there. It looked like it'll be a crosswind with the smoke off the locomotive.
Yeah, I got 3 fans and the AC unit going. It gets kind of warm up here.
Anybody have any more questions for Frank?
Can't say I do. I mean, some of the, some of these little tricks they've used, I'm quite impressed with.
Yeah, I am too.
Very nice.
Frank,
very
I
nice.
hope, Frank, I hope you will find time to write up your bicycle chain movement of the cars as an article. I think that would really be interesting to a lot of people.
All right. Yeah. Email or message me the information, and I'll see what I can do.
I'll do it.
All right.
Well, listen, Frank, thank you so much for your time and for
Sure.
showing us your Club's Railroad. We really do appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
so very much.
nice.
All right.
All right, guys. Next time we have a person, if I can find it here.
We have a person.
We have a person, if I can find his name here. Chuck Shrimper is coming. And he's going to talk to us about some great modeling tips and show us some models. So I think you'll really enjoy him. Unless anybody has anything else.
I found my photo of the fish. I'm trying to figure out how to show it to you.
I'd love to see that.
I've lost the picture to.
Yeah, but we can see what
I can see it.
Oh, can you see that?
Yep,
Yeah.
we can see it.
Oh, okay. So these are salmon.
Huh.
And I'd say they're probably about maybe an 1/8 of an inch long. And all I've done is roll them in my fingers and give the tail a little pinch to flatten it out, and then you can twist it, to look like they're actually swimming in school. So, and those are some waterfalls, and there's another school over there.
That's unbelievable. And then you place those on the bottom, and then you just pour the water over it.
Yeah, and depending on how deep you want to make it, usually I'll pour one cast, because I use casting resin. It's the really smelly stuff. I use a lot of hardener, and but it only has an odor for a day, so it doesn't bother me. I'll put one pour just to basically seal the bottom and the color, and then I'll just press the plasticine fish, gently onto that, because now it's a glossy surface, so it just basically sticks. And you can, depending on how many pores you put in, you can put them on top of various levels of pores, so you have a sense of depth as well, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is.
And so anyway, that's what I've used, and I don't tell anybody about it, but it's fun to watch, kids and adults when they come to visit, they find it on their own, and it usually gets a lot of attention. And then I've got two different sound chips from that have trickling water and waterfalls, and I have speakers buried in the rock along the river, and I alternate them so that as you walk along the river, the sound actually follows you.
Unbelievable.
Anyway, you mentioned fish, so I thought I would just take an opportunity to show you.
I thank you so much. I appreciate it. That's great. That is really great.
Well, I've enjoyed this evening, and I really like the idea of the 2D printed interior walls. I think that was a great idea.
I like I've got to pour all that water, and I'm trying to decide. I'm going to put stuff in it because you can see through it. And I'm trying to decide if fish are going to be appropriate, because I love the fish. I mean, being where rivers where we actually have fish and spawning and you can see them, that's cool. That's really cool.
I've never seen that before.
Now the trick is to make them move.
Yeah.
Well, there's always the bicycle chain.
So there's a heck of a model, is to build a little dam. It's maybe about, maybe something that's 20 or 30 feet high with a fish ramp next to it. And you can have them jumping up the fish ramp. No.
Jumping up the fish ramp. That would be quite the challenge.
That would be a fun.
Well, I mean, the fish ramp would just be a series of steps with a little bit of but then what you'd want to do is you'd probably want to use like some wire to hold a fish up out of the water. So it would be jumping.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that's all we got for tonight, unless anybody's got anything more.
Have a good evening, everybody. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it and hope you got something out of it. I know I did. And Phil, Frank, thank you so very much for all your help.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you all.